Welcome to The Long Game, Voices from the Health Front, a show about the people, ideas, and breakthroughs that are changing what it means to live healthier and longer. I'm your host, Shlomi Madar, CEO of SpotitEarly, where we are building a multi-cancer early detection platform using man's best friend and AI. Today, we are going to veer off the path of healthcare, as I'm sitting down with Professor Yossi Yovel from Tel Aviv University, where he heads the lab of neuroecology. Yossi has spent 2 decades studying how animals sense, navigate, and talk to each other, and he has published more than 80 papers in journals like Science, Nature Neuroscience, Cell, and Current Biology. Also, he recently published a popular science book called The Genius Bat, which I've read and enjoyed and highly recommend. It's also available as an audiobook. We'll put a link in the show notes. And what I find remarkable about Yossi's work is that he keeps showing us that biology has already figured out things that the best engineers we have are still trying to crack. Whether that's navigating by sound, detecting stress in plants from across a field, or decoding animal conversations using AI. We have a lot to unpack, so let's get into it. Yossi, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shlomi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, you hold degrees in biology, physics. You have a PhD that combines biology with machine learning, and somehow all of that led you to spend your career studying bats. And after reading the book, I also learned it could be dangerous at times. So I kind of like to hear from, with your own words, how that happened.
Okay, I don't know about dangerous. I mean, exciting, I would say. As dangerous as just walking in nature. Yeah, so I started, as you said, I knew I wanted to do biology. As a kid already, I was always interested in animals. In university, I started studying biology, but combined it with physics because I wanted also some quantitative ability to do stuff more quantitatively. And then I came across bat echolocation, bat's ability to sense the world using sound, which for me was like, both of the worlds of interest I was immersed in during those days kind of collided because suddenly I could read papers, about how animals use physics, use sound, use propagation of sound, use reflection properties in order to build the representation of the world that they live in. And for me, that was just a perfect combination. In brief, I was offered, or I came across an offer for a PhD in Germany in a lab studying echolocation, this ability of bats. We call it echolocation. And I took it quite quickly and yeah, I never looked back. I should say we study a lot of behaviors and a lot of animals these days, not only sensing, but we're still always very much interested in sensing and how the animals perceive the world.
Great. So your team recorded about 15,000, I should say, vocalizations, and they ran them through a voice recognition system that was originally built for human speech. And what you found was that virtually all of the noise coming from the roost, the bats' gathering places, is a directed conversation, and that bats change their tone depending on who they're addressing. And you also identified 4 distinct social contexts. And I noticed that you since built this large database of 300,000 vocalizations. So in the age of LLMs, how close are we to genuinely understanding what animals are saying to one another?
Yeah. Okay. I would say it's a big question. I would say often asked, by the way, I would say that on the one hand, machine learning, AI, especially LLMs, they give us very strong, powerful tools to detect patterns, which were previously very difficult to detect in large databases. On the other hand, I think that I don't want to mislead the people, like the general public, in thinking that we're about to be able to discuss deeply with animals. And the reason is not that the AI will not allow so, but rather that I think from what all we know, and we know quite a bit, animal communication is much more simple than human language. Okay, in human language, and you know what? From an evolutionary point of view, it's a bit of a mystery. How come we evolved this ability? I always say animals and humans they lie on a continuum. Every characteristic that we have, there's an animal, might be even ahead of us or behind us. But with language, somehow where there's a real gap because of this very unique system that we have, which has words, right? The units that I'm using right now, and grammar, which allows me to concatenate. I can rearrange the same units in different ways and create a lot of messages. And we don't think that any animal has anything similar to this as much as we know. So we will be able perhaps to maybe understand the mood of the animal, maybe its emotions using these machines. We will be able perhaps to even warn an animal when danger is coming, or maybe understand when an animal is warning another animal. But this is still very far from holding a conversation with animals. And my somewhat pessimistic but realistic opinion, I should say, is that we will never be able to have a podcast with an animal as you and I are having right now. By the way, I'm heading in the past 2 years, I've been the chair of the scientific committee of a prize. The Kohler Foundation announced a prize called the Kohler Doolittle Prize. The prize is given to research groups that, if you want, break the animal communication code. In more scientific terms, research groups that have advanced clearly our ability to understand animals and maybe also communicate with them. And then it's very exciting. I mean, there's a lot of work coming out. You mentioned my work on bats. This was already several years ago. At the time, it was a huge database, as you said, with dozens to hundreds of thousands of vocalizations. We're still curating this database, increasing it and improving it. But today, there are several databases out there for several animals, and more databases are coming out. It's becoming easier to record the animals, and I'm sure that AI will reveal a lot. I differ between decoding, so you could call it understanding what animals are saying and how they say it, and between our real ability to talk with animals as you and I are talking right now.
Great. And thank you for the realistic assumption. And to be honest, I'll take a basic conversation with my dog any day, even if it's just, I'm hungry, I want to go outside. I realize it may not be a very sophisticated conversation, but it's exciting nonetheless.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
yeah,
That's what we should think about. That's where we should aim, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So let's talk about other aspects of your work. So in a 2020 paper, you GPS tracked bats and found that they don't just remember where food trees are, they also track how much time has passed since their last visit. So basically they can reroute to avoid depleted trees. That sounds a lot like some sort of episodic memory and planning, which most of us may think, this might be a human ability. So how should we kind of rethink animal cognition after a finding like that? And you know what, I want to maybe, in regards to your previous point, I also think that consciousness, for example, could be a continuum. So I'm not expecting them to have the same consciousness that we have, but perhaps something akin to an early sign of consciousness is still there. So the lights may still be on. I would love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Consciousness is a tough topic because I think it's not even well defined, especially when talking about animals.
Right.
Even though super interesting. And I think, if we think about any cognitive ability, including consciousness, as I said earlier, from an evolutionary point of view, and also from an empirical point of view, nature is a continuum. Okay. There's nothing that appears de novo from nowhere. Even language we can trace some origins in the animal kingdom, even though I said language is unique, but still, animals I don't have time to go into details, but animals exhibit a lot of the precursors, let's call it, of human language. Thus, if somebody argues that animals have no consciousness, I think the duty of proof is on them, okay? Because, as I said, obviously, like the more parsimonious, right, the more obvious explanation is that everything lays on a continuum. So if you want to say that something is not continuous, you have to prove why and not vice versa. But going back to the beginning of your question, I think it's very challenging for us for our scientists, to come up with paradigms that test these cognitive capabilities in animals really in the wild, which is what we try to do, not in the lab. In the lab, it's also fine. I'm not against, of course, but we try to take it even one step forward and ask these questions in the animal's natural habitat. And the main reason for this is that, or there are few, but one of them is that the animals don't talk, right? So I can't just sit with them and ask them, okay, do you remember, etc. So it's this very big barrier of language. By the way, I always say, working with human toddlers, people who are interested in cognition of human toddlers, I have the same problem exactly, right? You have to come up with paradigms, experimental paradigms that indirectly kind of show that the animal has this capability. Okay, so indeed, you mentioned episodic memory, which is one of the most human characteristics, right? Our ability to sit here and travel without moving in space. I can travel in time and in space. I can now place myself somewhere else in the future or in the past, think of events that occurred to me, plan what I will do after this interview. And this is really, it's clear how this ability assists me in what we call my fitness, right? It's clear how planning ahead improves our ability to survive and have a better offspring and etc. So for years, for a long time, we've been thinking of how do we test this in animals. Of course, we're not the first. There's literature in corvids and in birds, in jays, that has showed similar stuff in the lab. But I've been thinking of how do we do this in the field? How do we ask this with bats? And here there's another important thing, and that is the animal you work with. Okay, another point that I should mention, we study different types of bats, different species, but one of them that I like very much is the fruit bat, Egyptian fruit bat to be precise, which is very common in Tel Aviv where my lab is. The interesting thing about these bats is that they feed on fruit trees. Now, fruit trees, usually they don't move in space, right? Sometimes a tree is removed, but often or mostly trees are fixed in space, but they change in time, over time, right? The fruit tree is ripe, and then 3 months later it is not. So it makes sense that the animals, the bats, these bats specifically, will track not only space, they need to know where fruit trees are, but they also, it made sense to us that they will also track time. So how long does a fruit tree provide food? And when was the last time I visited it? And then combining this information will allow me to plan ahead. I should say that this is very similar to human cognition, to ape cognition. If you think of chimps, they also in the forest, they track different fruit trees and they need to know when and where these fruit trees are available. And some people even say that this is one of the things that has driven human cognition, this need to map both space and time. Of course, it's only an hypothesis. So what we've done very, very briefly is we have our own colony in Tel Aviv, which is very unique because we track the same bats. We have miniature GPS devices on the bats. They fly, they come back, they fly, they come back, and we track them. So we basically know everything they eat. And now we could generate an individual map of, and I'll try to explain it very, very quickly without going into all of the small details, but we could generate an individual map. Let's say you, bat number one, visited this and this and this tree. And then what we've done is we kept the bats inside. We didn't allow them to go out, either for one night or for a whole week. And what we anticipated is that after one night, nothing in the world changes. So if yesterday you visited the plants A, B, and C, today you will visit the same, tomorrow, because today you don't go out, tomorrow you will visit the same plants. But after 1 week, time has passed already. A week is quite a lot for a tree. And after a week, you will take into account when was the last time you visited the tree and also how much time does this tree provide fruit, or in other words, you will be more probable to visit trees that provide food for a long time, right? And you will be less probable to visit trees that don't provide food for a long time. And that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what the bats did. That's exactly what we saw. Sorry, that's what the bat did.
Amazing. And just a quick follow-up question. Do bats also communicate while outside of the roost? Do they communicate maybe about the location of a ripe tree, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I would have loved that to be the case, right? Because we always want to look at these complex multi-agent systems. I should say there are 1,500 species of bats, and each species is a different animal. It's like comparing gorillas, chimpanzees, and I don't know, marmosets, which are tiny monkeys. So they're very, and humans, let's say, they're very different. Okay, and some bats do vocalize when flying, and maybe even do this in order to keep their group together. We see this, for example, with bats that forage, that hunt for insects, and we think that they are searching together for insects. Fortunately, but that's reality, that's nature. Our fruit bats don't seem to be doing this. They seem to individually remember. We do think that they what we call glean information. So when they come back home, and there are a lot of bats around, they can smell which bat ate what, and maybe we think, and there's some evidence that this provides them information about what is ripe right now. So imagine that there's a fruit that is only ripe during this season. I haven't eaten it for a year. I don't know if it's ripe. I go back home. I smell that you ate it. And now I remember that this must be the season of that fruit. And tomorrow I will fly in that direction. So there is some kind of communal information, but it's not that they voluntarily talk about these things as much as we understand.
Great. And I'm still a bit surprised to hear that there are 1,500 species of bats. I think I read about it in the book, and I remember I was taken aback. I mean, how could this be such a big? I know that some of them are in danger, right? Can you give us like a quick kind of overview of this 1,500? Where are they in the world? How many of them are endangered, or is that too much for our short podcast?
No. Of course, I can give you an overview. I cannot go over them one by one. But so first of all, I should say that more than 20% of mammalian species are bats. It's a huge group.
Wow.
It's some people say it's the most diverse. If you think of rodents, rodents are the biggest group. Most of them are herbivores, right? Most of them eat plants. If you think of bats, they eat anything you can imagine. So from insects, fruit, fish, frogs, other bats, birds, snakes, and even blood. There's some species of bats that
Yeah.
expertise on blood. So it's really a diverse group. You can find them anywhere except for Antarctic, and they vary in size from tiny. Some of them are less than 2 grams in weight. Some of them have a wingspan of, you can't see my hands, but of more than 1.5 meters, so gigantic, and really many groups that expertise in many different niches, different sensory modalities. Some of them rely only on vision, some of them very poor vision and a lot of sonar. Some of them have thermal sensing. Really diverse group.
Great. So, final question before we dive into the quick round. So, you guys built something called Robat, which is the first kind of fully autonomous robot that navigates entirely by echolocation. It can classify objects, tell a word from a plant, it can decide whether it can pass through or not. So, where does that line of research stands today? And do you see any realistic path towards kind of autonomous system that can operate in environments where vision-based sensors struggle? Because we've seen a lot of robots, but we're not sure that they can navigate in any terrain.
Yeah. Originally, this was a proof of concept. I've learned that you can study the animal, come up with an hypothesis, then you can develop a simulation. We do that a lot, but until you build the actual thing, you don't encounter a lot of the problems, right? So we built a robot, terrestrial, not flying. In a different project, we built a flying one, but a simpler one, which indeed navigates and maps in new environments completely autonomously using sound. So it has a speaker, emits ultrasonic pulses like an echolocating bat. It has two microphones like a bat has two ears, and it performs all of the processing on board. As you said, it can localize objects and to some extent also identify objects using. This was already almost 10 years ago, so there was very simple neural net embedded in the software. Now, we've done several studies in collaboration with companies, including advising some companies, including projects that have to do with agriculture, using sonar in agriculture. And a colleague of mine who used to be also a professor, and today he's an entrepreneur, is actually leading the efforts of using this sonar now in various applications, mostly agricultural applications. Yeah, I mean, occasionally we're playing around with the idea of building a fully autonomous flying robot using sonar. Occasionally there are companies that contact me and think of embedding sonar into their drone, for example, as an additional sensor. We have mounted the sonar on drones in the past, especially to examine the amount of noise created by the rotors and to make sure that we can still sense echoes despite the rotors, and we found that we can. So potentially, it's all there. In the academy, we're not pursuing usually, not pursuing a specific product. So it's more about proof of concept. So the reason for me to pursue something like this is either a student that is really interested in building something like that, and then I would definitely be happy, or some company that comes and wants us to assist them as a consultant in how to integrate sonar into the
Yeah, that's for all the drone developer listening to this podcast. If you have a great
exactly.
idea and you need sonar-based technology, Yossi is your guy.
Maybe I should say a sentence, because probably, if you address these people, they're probably asking why is it better than vision or LiDAR? So yeah, so it's an additional sensor. I don't think it's better. If you think of the amount of information that is acquired, it's much smaller than with electromagnetic waves, right? Because these are sound waves, right? It can see in the dark. It can see when there is dust. It can see in short range, so you don't have a lot of interference problems, which you have when using a radar, for example, with autonomous vehicles. It's the beam is wide, unlike laser, where you have to scan. So again, I'm not saying this is the best sensor. I think every sensor has its advantages and disadvantages, but it's definitely an interesting sensor that could assist the other sensors in many of the tasks.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. But remember, you cannot foresee different environmental conditions, and if you can extend the range, for example, of a drone or any other type of robot to operate when there's maybe some cloudy weather or whatnot, that's already amazing onto itself.
Right.
Great. So Yossi, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure, as always.
All right. So we'll start with the first kind of maybe more general question, and that is, what gives you the most hope right now? And it could be on any topic, scientific, non-scientific, whatever comes to your mind.
I don't know if it's hope, but more I would say joy. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, I'll
Writing,
take it.
writing. In the past years, even I would say I invest a lot of my time in writing, writing popular articles, writing books. Now I'm working on a children's book, and I really have fun in trying to pass. I used to love doing science, I still do, but I love not less. I now love this role of passing the science onwards to the public.
Great answer. All right. What is the one thing about biology that most people get completely wrong?
No, I don't know if it's the most, but just based on a conversation that I had recently, people still have this idea of evolution, creating the best solutions, and we're trying. I'm not an evolutionary behaviorist or biologist, but we actually talk about trade-offs. Okay, so you have to remember. I give you a very simple, very very simple, stupid example. The cheetahs are the fastest animals on Earth, right? On land, mammals. If it's so good to be so fast, why are not all animals or some other animals so fast as well, right? And the reason is that every animal expresses a combination of thousands, hundreds of thousands of characteristics. And there's no way you can optimize all of them, right? You can't be the fastest and the biggest at the same time, right? Just that you can't be a bodybuilder and a marathon runner. It doesn't work. Okay. So I think some people still think about the optimum when they think about evolution. And the idea is that there are always a lot of trade-offs. I like to think of evolution as, you're climbing a mountain where the axes are the different characteristics, and there are many mountains. Each mountain is a good solution, and they're all equally good, or at least, we don't necessarily see the differences between them. And that's how evolution works. And that's why there's so much variability. There's so many species, so many different species, and so many solutions, let's say.
Nice. And it kind of reminds me of a book by Richard Dawkins, Climbing Mount Improbable. So I think it has kind of a somewhat similar notion. But I agree with you. Eventually, we are all compromises, but good ones because we made it so far.
Exactly.
Great answers. So, what book or idea changed how you think or just influenced you the most?
Yeah. Okay. So the obvious would be indeed Dawkins, right? One of Dawkins, probably The Selfish Gene. I read it as a kid. It was fantastic, definitely. It made a huge impact. I can tell you that when I interview students who are coming to the Tel Aviv University Excellence Program, most of them say this is the book that influenced them most. But because it was because it's so cliche, let's say, maybe I'll choose a different one. As a kid, I read a lot of books, both by Gerald Darrell and also by James Herriot, who was maybe I'll talk about his books. He was a veterinarian in countryside England, Yorkshire, if I remember correctly. And his descriptions of how in the middle of the night he goes and assists a cow to give birth. They were just these are things that drew me into being an animal behaviorist.
Nice, nice. All right. So, last question. One sentence to describe the future of biology and technology. I mean, there's so many things that are going on right now. What do you see as maybe the brightest option for us? Let's assume that all the risks are mitigated. How does that future look like to you?
Okay, the future is huge. That I can answer for sure. I think we're talking about biotech will explode, will explode. It will explode. I think a lot of people coming out of the high tech don't understand. And I know I have some friends who came out of several different units and thought they're going to hack biology and do biotech, and then they realized how difficult. It's not like with high tech where you can move from the idea to the implementation very very fast. There's a huge gap in between, especially if you need to do research. But maybe I'll talk about one thing that we've been doing recently, and that's the use of large language models, or let me call them sequence learning models, because they're not necessarily for language, and their ability to model complex behavior. Recently, for example, we've taken such a model that has been trained on language, and we trained it to navigate like a bat. Now, for me, this is more on the scientific side, I must say, and less on the technological. It's like exploiting technology to do science that we could not do before. And now I have a tool, a model that navigates like a bat. And for me, this is something I could not do before. I could come up with a very, very rough approximation with a lot of assumption for some kind of small component of the behavior. And now I can model the full behavior. So we're just starting to think, what can I do with such models? And for me, this is super exciting. I think, I'm already thinking about several of these models moving together, maybe evolving. Again, infinite possibilities, but we're just starting to think of how to use this.
That's great. So before I let you go, where can people find you? Do you want to plug anything other than your book?
Yeah, so first of all, as you said, the Genius Badge just came out. It's still very new, just a few months ago. So yeah, I hope some of you at least enjoy it.
Oh, it's a great listen. I really, some of us can't read anymore, so we
Yeah,
listen to books. So if you're one of those people, please do yourself a favor, enjoy. It's a very deep book, interesting book, fascinating, a lot of breakthroughs that I wasn't aware of. So I really highly recommend. Go get that book.
I also have difficulties reading, I admit, but I can say that each chapter is written as a whole, as a separate story. So you
Yep.
can read it chapter by chapter. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. We have a bat lab website. It's called the Yovel Bat Lab, where you can find all of our papers, all of our new papers, just like anyone else.
Great. And we're happy to include links in the show notes for everything you mentioned. And with that, that's all for today's episode of The Long Game, Voices from the Health Front. Thank you so much, Yossi, for a fascinating conversation. If you want to learn more about what we're building at SpotitEarly, head to SpotitEarly.com. And if you wish to join our journey, please visit SpotitEarly.com/invest. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.